I'm going to share an excerpt from a book, My Father's War, by Charles Valera. And he wrote this book because he and his dad never spoke about his father's World War II experiences. And he sensed a great loss when his dad passed away, that he had no knowledge or understanding of such things. And his goal and his mission in writing this book was to document as many World War II veterans' stories as he could. And one of those fellows that he spoke about and shared their story was a New York resident, George J. Pelletier. Served in Europe as a machine gunner under the old blood and guts himself, General George S. Patton's Third Army. And he witnessed a lot of vicious action during his tour of duty. Pelletier was one of the first 200 men to cross the Rhine River during the fighting that broke out there. He said, "It was a very quiet moonless night. It was midnight, and we started to cross. I was in the second wave. Daybreak allowed the Americans to cross the river using a specially designed pontoon bridge. Trucks, tanks, and troops, they all filed across peaceably, believe it or not, given the state of things. As it would happen, Pelletier says, they spotted us coming around the hill and started picking us off. Shells were landing everywhere, as close as 5 yards from me. I was dazed, but prayed like mad. I then spotted a hole in the ground, which probably saved my life, as 3 men behind me were hit. We took a beating that day." He goes on to say, "One of my buddies was killed, 2 or more wounded, all in my platoon. We were 3 days without food or water. Our squad, or rather 4 out of 7 that were left, drank water from the jacket of our gun." In a portion of a letter to his soon-to-be wife, his fiancée, he wrote, and this really encapsulates the day that we commemorate tomorrow. He said, "All through this, I learned to realize a lot of things. I know what war is now. I've seen it. I've seen men die and maimed for life. I've seen homes destroyed, families separated and poor, unfed children. Now, when I get back home, I know what needs to be done, and no one is to cross me or any of these other GIs who have come to know all this. We owe a debt to our buddies, and we're going to see that what they wanted and dreamed about will be accomplished." Incredible words. As I reflect upon what George said, I can't help but wonder if there are many in the current generations who would be thinking this same thing. We survived. Our mission is not to roll up in a ball somewhere. Our mission isn't self-focused. Rather, our mission is to fulfill those things that our buddies who passed away on the beaches, in the inlands, and the islands, and in the air and in the sea, so long ago, that our mission is to fulfill their dreams. It's no wonder why it's been referred to as the greatest generation. And I have to say, as a veteran, airborne Army Ranger, my favorite vets are the World War II vets. Because as young men, as George had said in another part of his account, when Pearl Harbor occurred, a town full of 18 and 19-year-old guys went down to the recruiting station, filed in line, and volunteered. Volunteered for something that was going to change their life. Volunteered for something that was going to be horrendous. But they volunteered nonetheless because they understood, as MacArthur said, duty, honor, country. I wonder if our country still has that same fabric through and through. I dare say it doesn't. As we look upon our college campuses and see some riotings going on and cars being burnt and looting, all in the name of what? Freedom? These men understood freedom because they put it on the line every single day. When I think about this, and I think about things like Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and the like, I think of men and women who paid the ultimate price for their country and their fellow brothers in arms. Many of our brothers in arms died preserving the lives of their fellow soldiers, sailors, airmen, and the like. You know, Jesus brings out the significance of this when he says in John 15:13, "Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends." Laying down one's life willingly for one's friends is the ultimate gift we can give a friend. And we had seen this over and over and over and over again in the history. And I dare say there are men and women that are cut from this cloth. Not as many as there used to be proportionally, but I dare say there's still a line of those who would step up and have stepped up. So I don't think our country is devoid of it. It just ain't as many as it used to be. It just ain't the fabric and the fiber it once was. Proverbs 18:24 brings this out, this bond out between brothers in arms. In this way, it says, "A man who has friends must himself be friendly." Let's underscore this point here. "But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." A friend who sticks closer than a brother. And I dare say, in the big planes, in the big ships, in the big battlefields, and even as they go out and try to clear town by town and area by area today of terrorist threats, there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. You know, we see an example of this sort of love and respect in 1 Samuel chapters 17 through 2 Samuel chapter 9 in the Old Testament. There we see two warriors. And I underscore warriors because guess what? These fellas understood fighting in a manner that we do not understand today. It was always hand to hand. It was always up close. Could see the eyes of your enemy. There's David and Jonathan. King David, Prince Jonathan. David didn't start out as a king. He was a lowly shepherd boy who developed his warrior skills by taking on not men, but lions and bears, and overcoming and defeating them as a young man. 1 Samuel 17:34 through 37, there it says, your servant, David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine," he's talking about Goliath, "will be like one of them, because he has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine." See, young, ruddy, good-looking David was the last choice that they would make in terms of fighting this massive man, this strong man, this tough guy, this warrior of warriors. They weren't going to pick him. When he came out to deliver food to his brothers, they mocked him. They mocked him for coming out. "Go home, boy, go home." As they stood on the sideline in fear, nobody wanted to face the Goliath. And David was given his resume. "I've killed lions. I've killed bears. I can take this one on too." Jonathan, the son of King Saul, most likely received his formal military training from some of the best military trainers in Israel of the day. So he was a bit more polished in his way. He didn't go against bears and lions. He received more formal training. You might say a West Pointer. A great and lasting brotherhood was forged between these two warriors and men of God. Both were honorable men who loved God and loved their king, Saul. These warriors' brotherhood was forged through three important factors. First, we see in 1 Samuel 17, David slays Goliath, and as a result of this act of bravery, this bravery helped forge a brotherhood between David and Jonathan. Because the fact of the matter is all the men, the warriors who had fought and were well trained and whatnot, they were afraid to go against this guy Goliath. They felt they would be crushed. So nobody would step forth to represent the country in this match, this death match. When young David did, and he overcame Goliath and killed him, he became what we would call today a rock star. I mean, Jonathan, even though he was a prince, it's like, you're the man. You're the man. I mean, a lot of people appreciated people like Joe Louis and Rocky Marciano and Muhammad Ali and other great boxers or great wrestlers, Dan Gable and people like that. But he went into a death match and overcame the giant. And he became a rock star. And everybody, including the prince, took this young man and they lifted him up because he saved the country and he did something that no one else would do. This brotherhood was forged through bravery. We see after David slayed Goliath in 1 Samuel 18:1, it says, after David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. And this was no kind of kinky kind of love going on here. It's the kind of love that one warrior has for another. I say that only because there's people out there, believe it or not, that try to turn this into something it isn't. But those of us, veterans, who have spent any kind of time going through something together, understand what this kind of love is. In 1 Samuel 18:3, the brotherhood was formally established when it says that Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. This brotherhood between David and Jonathan was forged through the bravery exhibited by David when he took down Goliath. David and Jonathan's relationship was initially forged through David's bravery. Once established, it was forged further through battle. David was the greatest of the great in terms of fighting. One-on-one fighting, they say he killed his tens of thousands. I mean, think about that with a sword or a spear. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of effort. After David slayed Goliath, David, Jonathan, and the army of Israel engaged the enemy in battle. 1 Samuel 18:5 says, "Whatever Saul sent him to do, David did it so successfully that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the people and Saul's officers as well." David excelled at these things. Not because David in and of himself was great, but because God used him to bless the nation. And one might say, well, war is bad, war is terrible. And we started out by referencing how terrible it can be, right? But when you have nations round about you, that their practices are to take their children and burn them in fire as sacrifices, and they have other ways that are disdainful, and they're trying to come in and overtake you, what can you do? There's nothing wrong with defending oneself. And David, Jonathan, and the army did so. Jonathan was so impressed that it says in 1 Samuel 18:4, Jonathan took off the robe. Remember, it's a princely robe, not just any robe, it's a special robe. One made for a prince, not a pauper. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. He essentially disarmed himself, disrobed himself, and said, "Here, you deserve these things more than I do, because you're a better man than I am. You trusted in God when nobody else was trusting in God. You now lead us in battle, victory after victory after victory." Jonathan paid David the highest of honors as a warrior. He gave him his battle garments and weapons. Once Jonathan and David became one in spirit, as 1 Samuel 18:1 points out, there was no turning back in this relationship. They fought together, they laughed together, they enjoyed life together, growing up as young men. 1 Samuel 18:6-7 says, "When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs and with tambourines and lutes. As they danced, they sang, 'Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands.'" Uh-oh. Saul was a good man, a humble man when God chose him, but he was king now. And he had an ego. And hearing that this upstart that you raised up through the ranks all of a sudden is being recognized as outdoing you tenfold, not the kind of thing a king wants to hear. Rather than rejoicing in all that David had done for him and for God, Saul became jealous and felt threatened by David's success. In verses 10-11, it says, "Saul had a spear in his hand and hurled it, saying to himself, 'I'll pin David to the wall.' But David eluded it twice." David's success on the battlefield, expanding the territories, protecting the nation and whatnot on behalf of God and Saul, reaped him Saul's threat to murder him out of jealousy, out of spite, out of anger, like a little boy. In verse 17 it says, "For Saul said to himself, I will not raise a hand against him. This is after the first plot failed. But let the Philistines do that. He planned for David's demise. In 1 Samuel 19:1 it says, Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. And they're out in the battlefield. But Jonathan was very fond of David and warned him, my father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning, go into hiding, and stay there. Regardless of all that David did for King Saul, Saul plotted to kill him. Jonathan, showing his love and loyalty to David, displayed acts of benevolence as well. How? In verse 2, Jonathan warned David, my father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning, go into hiding and stay. I mean, what more could forge a relationship, a bond, than when you're in a fix and somebody's trying to plot? The most powerful man in your country is trying to plot your life and take it. And who of all people come up and stands up on your behalf at that time and warns you, flee? Jonathan. Jonathan was paying back David by loyalty and love. And David embraced that. And why wouldn't you? A real friend, even when a father is standing in the way of that friendship, will put right above wrong. Jonathan also defended David before his father, saying in verse 32, why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asked his dad, his father. In verses 33, we see that Jonathan almost lost his life because he defended David. Because Saul's anger and bitterness and jealousy was so great that not even his son could be spared from it. There it says, but Saul hurled a spear at him, at his son Jonathan. Why? To scare him? No. Scripture says to kill him. To kill him. Think about your own dad, your own father. Some of you have shown loyalty to and support, being so enraged and so jealous, he's going to try to take you out. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. Jonathan was willing to suffer loss on David's behalf. We realize this when we review 1 Samuel 20:31. There we see Saul breaking it down for Jonathan, saying to him, as long, and this is something really important to pay attention to, as long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. What's Saul saying to his son? Listen to me. Listen to reason. The reason being, you're not going to have a kingdom if this guy sticks around. Why? Because the people love him. Because the army loves him. Because everybody loves him. And they're going to give it all to him. And you're going to lose it all. Jonathan, though, he was willing to forfeit even the kingship for his friendship with his brother in arms, his fellow veteran. When time came, David reciprocated. He remembered what Jonathan had done for him. Now he was king. And in 2 Samuel 9, after David found out that Jonathan had died in battle, he found Jonathan's only remaining son, Mephibosheth. Not the kind of name you want to have to say on a Sunday morning. And restored all the land his grandfather, Saul, had owned and lost. And now he was also allowed and invited to dine every day, every meal, at the king's table. When David learned of his friend's death, Jonathan. He said in 2 Samuel 1:25 through 27, "How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother." Jonathan, my brother, you were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of a woman. How the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished. Why was David so enthralled now with Jonathan? Wouldn't you be if your father, the king, had sought to kill somebody and you gave him a heads up and looked out for them? Wouldn't you be if somebody who rightly deserved the kingship said, "You're the better man. I'm going to serve you. You're the better man"? David had a lot of reasons to love this fella. They were warriors. It was forged in battle. It was forged in life. It was forged through the up and the down times. It was validated by this young prince being willing to give up everything for his friendship. These two warriors, these two men of God, forged a loving and supportive relationship, one that brought joy and sorrow, one that was so deep that they would have died for one another. John 15:13. There Jesus says, "Greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friend." And both of these men, time and time again, proved that in battle and in life. Laying down one's life, or the willingness to do so, again, is the ultimate gift. And that, ultimately, as we think back about George and his message to us from his World War II experiences, we owe a debt to our buddies. And we're going to see that which they wanted and dreamed about will be accomplished. It's the same love. It's the same respect. It's the same brotherhood. And that's why we have times of commemoration for our veterans and for others who gave the ultimate sacrifice for it all.